BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Big Country Preps Wednesday Night Podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we're going to forego our typical guests that we usually have on Wednesday nights to talk about the playoffs, what happened in the area around last week, and what's going to transpire, perhaps our predictions for the regional semifinals this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've still got quite a few teams in action, 14 total, counting 6-man, 9 11-man teams have survived to the third round. And those that are left, for the most part, are teams that have an opportunity to continue their runs if they can play well. So it's going to be fun to take a look at kind of what's happened and what we are looking forward to here on the playoff scene. Still a lot of football to be played. There's still several area teams with not just a shot to advance to Arlington, but a good chance if they can continue to play as well as they have. So we'll take a closer look at that here in a little bit, and it should be a fun conversation.
All right. And before we get started with this week's show, we need to thank a couple of our sponsors, beginning with our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of For the Love of the Game Broadcasting, and K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, KATX 97.7 FM out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is For the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear, Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle, new or used, give Rob a shot. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. Call him at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bear, Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. Also, we want to remind you, YouTubers, to please hit the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe button, and then when that little bell pops up, hit that too, and then you'll get notifications each and every time that Big Country Preps posts a new video on YouTube.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump in. We'll just go right down the list. We'll start with some of last week's action, kind of recapping what happened. And we'll start at the 5A level with the locals. Abilene High, our lone Abilene public school to advance to the region semifinals. They won 31-21 over Denton Ryan in a really impressive victory. That was a big game for the Eagles. Came away with a really nice win, came from behind. They trailed a little bit early and then just kind of took over there in the second half to start that one. So a big win for the Eagles, advances them to the third round, and we will talk a little about that matchup in a little bit. Elsewhere in Class 5A, we lost both Wiley and Cooper. Wiley was defeated 49-14 by Argyle, while Cooper lost 55-21 to Colleyville Heritage. And both of those, unfortunately, were just cases where they were a little bit outmanned by really good, really explosive Metroplex teams. So we had to say goodbye to the Bulldogs and the Cougars last week.
Moving down to 4A, I was a bit surprised by the spread on that Brownwood Canyon Randall matchup there, 37-10. I did expect the Lions to win that one in a close one, but 37-10. That's a good football team that Brownwood beat up on and shut them down defensively. If Brownwood, is getting stops defensively, because we know they can score, but they started getting a lot of defensive stops, they're going to be a really tough out down the stretch.
Yeah, they're playing really well right now. They finished the regular season with a couple of really impressive wins, 35-14 over a really good Lubbock Estacado team that is still playing, and then 28-14 over an Andrews team that was that played up until last week before they got knocked out. So I really like the way this Brownwood team's playing. I'm excited to see what they do going forward. But yeah, you are right. That Canyon Randall score was eye-opening for me as well when you look at the margin.
All right, and in the area around in Region 2, Stephenville over Dallas Carter, 20-10, and perhaps a tougher defensive game than I expected. I thought that was going to be maybe a little higher scoring, maybe with a little bit bigger spread. Dallas Carter gave Stephenville all it wanted.
Here's one thing I like about the Stephenville team is they're proving they can win those defensive games. You look at what they did against China Spring, where they really just kind of dominated them up front. This is another one where they didn't score like you expect maybe a Stephenville team to with just the 20 points against Dallas Carter, but they hold them to 10 and still win by 2 scores. That's something I like about the Stephenville team is it's capable of playing that type of grinded out defensive game, which hasn't always been the case there. So I'm excited to see kind of what they do going forward as well.
All right, now we're going to drop down to Class 4A D2. We lost our remaining team, Dan, the Sweetwater Mustangs. We had to bid farewell to them. They lose to an undefeated Monahans team, 56-13. But I'll tell you what, 7-5 for a team that is loaded with freshmen and sophomores. You've got to be pleased with that if you are a Mustang fan. That's a great season for a very young team. I mean, at a lot of schools, most of these kids would still be, on JV. Yeah, and they're Sweetwater's varsity. Great season.
I agree, and this is a team you have to remember also that went 1-9 last year, so that just a huge bounce back year. And like you said, there's a lot of youth on that team, so this is going to be a great platform season that they can build off of, and it's going to be exciting to see what some of those young kids, particularly on that offensive side, some of those skill guys can do going forward. But I agree with you, a great season for Coach Russell Lucas and the Mustangs.
All right, now we're going to drop down to Region 1, 3A, D1, in the area around both of the big country teams that were still alive at that division, in that division, rather. Both advanced. Clyde eliminated Shallow Water in a tough ball game, 26-21. And Brock pretty well did what we thought they were going to do to Muleshoe. I mean, a good Muleshoe team, but Muleshoe hadn't faced anything even remotely close to that Brock ball club. And the 76-13 final does not surprise me.
No, and that was one where Brock just dominated all three phases. Had a couple of defensive scores, had some special team scores, offensively do what they've done all year. I was at the Clyde game, and that one was, like you said, that was a hard fought game against Shallow Water. One thing that struck me, and I'm sure that you've noticed in the times you've seen Clyde play, is this is my first time to get to see Blake Carr play in person. And he did not disappoint. He did not have his most efficient game, only completed 10 of 29 passes, had kind of a rough pick six that got Shallow Water back into the game. But when that game needed to be won, when they needed somebody to go and make a play to win it, he was that guy. Made a huge fourth down conversion on their last drive to seal the victory on a play where he was hitting the backfield and just kind of willed his way to that first down. And that's one thing Coach Dudgeon said about him, was just that if he's just a guy, of all the guys that Coach Dudgeon has coached, he said that Blake Carr is the one that just has the strongest will to win, that he's just a kid that just refuses to lose, and we got to see that in that game. So a big win for Clyde, gets them to the third round, and that's a remarkable season for the Bulldogs now, 11-1. Just a great run there on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This is the best Clyde team that I've seen since the Craig Slaughter era in Clyde, and that dates back over a decade now. It's good to see Clyde playing at this level. And it's only going to get tougher. We'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to drop down now to Class 3A D2, where we lost the early Longhorns in a rout to Canadian 77-22, and the Wall Hawks advance in a tough win over Childress. And it's good to see that Wall can to gut it out and win these close games like this, because that's what's going to take if they're going to make it out of this region. They're going to have to play their game and keep it close to the vest. They can't get in a shootout with somebody like a Canadian later on and hope to win. They have to win games like this. So this was a big win, and a good win for Coach Houston.
Yeah,
Coach Guy, rather.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 21-14 margin. That plays right into what Wall likes to do, is getting those defensive games, grind out the clock, get that option game going, and they're really playing at a high level as well. They're at 10-2 going into next week's game, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Or sorry, this week's game. But Wall, yeah, I think that one's kind of a perfect example of how Wall is built to win, and that's a huge win for them over a good Childress team. So they get to keep going and try to fight for that region title here coming up.
In Region 2, we had one team remaining, and that was the Comanche Indians, and they have won. They eliminated Scurry Rosser, and this was an undefeated Scurry Rosser team. But if you looked at Scurry Rosser going into that football game, they hadn't played anybody. And I'm not taking anything away from Comanche's win. Comanche, it's still an impressive win. Just undefeated, is doing a great job. But Scurry Rosser hadn't played one team this season with more than 6 wins. And I think everybody on our staff picked Comanche to beat them, and with good reason. Comanche, when they are healthy, is an outstanding football team, a regional threat football team. And they really gave Scurry Rosser a thumping, gave them their only loss of the year, and knocked them out of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the thing.
21.
Yeah, you mentioned it, that when Comanche's healthy, it's a really good football team, and they got healthy there at the end of the season with a 48-0 win over a very solid Merkel team. Turn around, beat a pretty solid Eastland team 46-7, and then get that 20-point win over an undefeated Scurry Rosser team. So I love the way this Comanche team's playing. Unfortunately, they've got a really tough one coming up, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But you got to be, I think, impressed with the way that they kind of rebounded, because they had that rough patch in the middle of the season where they lost several games in a row, had to regroup from that, and they're playing their best football at the right time. So congratulations to Coach Jake Escobar and that group on a good run as well.
All right. Now, the Big Country took a hit in Class 2A D1. We entered in Region 1 with 3 teams still alive. We had Stanford, we had Holly, we had Cisco. Holly walks away as the lone survivor from our area. New Deal knocks off Cisco 52-21. Stratford eliminates Stanford 22-7. Holly, with a surprising rout of a good panhandle team, an explosive panhandle team, just KOs them, knocks them out of the bracket with a big win, 59-16, and they move on. Big win for Holly. You were saying you could not see them getting eliminated in week 2. You called
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like this was one of several scores we had.
Round 2, I should say.
Yeah, but this is one of several scores we had in our area where I wasn't necessarily surprised by the outcome because I predicted Holly to win. But when I saw that score, I was like, goodness, if Holly's playing this well at this time, they've got a chance to really make a deep run again. But a huge win for Holly. Coach Mitch Abels has them playing really well again at the exactly right time. And at this point, I mean, I think they're definitely a regional threat, perhaps a state threat with the way they're playing. And like you said, we had to say goodbye to Stanford, which I mean, it takes a really good defense to shut down that Stanford offense. Stratford was up to that task, beating them 22-7. And then Cisco, I think you can make a fairly strong case they overachieved to get to this point, or at least rebounded well after kind of a tough start against a really tough schedule. So I think Cisco, even though that game did not go again the way they wanted to against New Deal, I think that was a successful kind of foundational season for them as well that they can build off of going forward.
Well, the hits just kept on coming in Class 2A D1 in Region 2. We had 2 teams still alive. De Leon and Coleman entered last week in the area round. Both fall. Italy knocks out De Leon 55-19. Marlin eliminates Coleman 30-28, but Coleman made a heck of a comeback in a ball game that you attended. Yep. They were down big and almost pulled it off.
Yeah, that was a really crazy game. Marlin dominated the first half and scored on their first possession of the second half. Their only touchdown of only points of the entire second half to go up 30-6 midway through the third quarter. And then Jaden Jackson slides into quarterbacks. They have an injury there. Braden Torres gets hurt. So Jaden Jackson goes back to his familiar position at quarterback, leads 3 consecutive touchdown drives, converts 2-point conversions on each of the first 2. On the third, with a chance to tie it, he stopped inches short. And that ends up being the final margin, though Coleman had another full possession and they weren't able to quite get anything going with that one. But a really strong showing for a Coleman team that looked like they were dead in the water there for a while. Marlin came out and hit several big explosive pass plays over the top. Coleman was able to kind of fix that. They stopped the run all night. And unfortunately, it was just too big a hole to climb out of, kind of a too little, too late situation. But Coleman, I mean, Marlin's a really good football team, and Coleman stood toe to toe with them and had a chance to win that game at the end with a huge rally. So, nothing to hang their head about there. I know they're going to be disappointed with the loss, but a really strong effort for Coleman in the Blue Cats.
All right, now we're going to drop down to Class 2A, D2. We had 2 ball clubs alive in Region 2. We had Albany. We had Roscoe, and I shouldn't be speaking of them in the past tense because they both won. Albany eliminated Celeste fairly easily, 56-0, and Roscoe with a stunner over Windthorst, 50-22, and there was nothing fluky about that. A lot of people had Windthorst picked. A lot of people were convinced that this was going to be the end for Roscoe, and they just lined up and hit those guys in the mouth and knocked them silly. They just beat them up. 50-22, a dominating performance for the Plowboys. Perhaps the most impressive game I've ever seen them play, ever.
Yeah, and that's another one where I predicted Roscoe to win the game, but when I saw the score, I had to call you because you were at the game. I was like, "What? How did that happen?" Not necessarily that I was surprised they won, but just the fact that they dominated a really good Windthorst team the way they did was really a surprise. But this is a really good Roscoe team. I got to see them against Junction in the non-district portion of their schedule, and just a lot of weapons. They've got a lot of kids. I mean, you talk about Ivan McCann at that running back position, had over 200 yards in that game. Seth Wilcox is one of the most explosive weapons of any team at any classification in the big country. Parker Gleaton's a kid that obviously is a matchup nightmare at that level. And you got to be impressed with what the Arnwine kid has done in an unexpected starting quarterback role. He was not expected to be the starter this year. Kid got jumped in there with some injuries to Jax Watts and has done just a remarkable job. But you have got to be really impressed with what Coach Freeman has done with this Roscoe bunch, and what a win for them over a good Windthorst team. That was just a huge statement win.
The last 11-man team that we had on the menu last week was Heiko, and that's in Region 3, 2A, D2. Great season for the Tigers comes to an end with a 42-7 loss. Heiko went in a bit shorthanded, missing a running back, missing the quarterback, and just got it handed to him. But that's the way it goes. But a great season for Todd Swearingen and the Tigers. Tremendous season. That's one of the best seasons we've seen them have in probably, 5 or 6 years at least.
Yeah, and I think Coach Swearingen's kind of laid that foundation the last couple of years, gotten into the playoffs. This is the team, I think, that took a big step forward that kind of sets the expectation going forward. This is a program that can not only reach the playoffs, but win in the playoffs. And had they stayed healthy, that game may have gone differently. They lost a couple of really key players toward the end of the season. But I agree with you. Just a great season for Heiko, and one that I think we'll see them build on. Coach Swearingen has some really nice things going on there, and this was a big year for them. So congratulations to Heiko on a great season.
All right, let's take a look at what's going to be going down this week. We've got a number of playoff games the day after Thanksgiving. Everything's going to be shut down on Thanksgiving, of course. And Dan, right at the top of the list, we got a regional semifinal, Abilene against Justin Northwest. You are going to be on hand in Wichita Falls Memorial Stadium for that one.
Yeah, and I'm expecting another really good game. I mean, this is a really good Northwest team, 10-2, run the ball really well. They're probably leaning more heavily toward the run than the pass, but very physical, good football team. But the thing about this Abilene High team in this region in particular, they may run into a team at some point in their classification that does outman them, but it's not going to happen here. This is a really good football team that is capable of lining up physically on both sides of the ball and having success. And I think that's something that's makes this team a little special. They've been really good defensively a lot under Coach Fullen as the head coach. They've made 2 runs to the third round with teams that really weren't expected to. This team was kind of different. This team, I think, when you watched them play in the non-district portion in the district schedule, you expected them to make a deep run. So no one's surprised to see them here. And it's gonna be fun to see if they can answer this one. I think on paper I would give Abilene High a slight favorite here, maybe a touchdown favorite. But it's going to be a tough matchup, as all third round matchups are. It could go either way. But this Abilene High team is really well equipped to compete with anybody in this region. Very good, very explosive offensively, and then defensively just so sound. I'm going Abilene High. I think Abilene High wins it.
You know what? I'm going to agree with you, as much as I hate agreeing with you on anything. I'm going to take Abilene also. They're red hot right now. They're playing well, playing very well defensively. I'm going with the Eagles. All right, now we're going to jump down to Region 1 for a D1 for a regional semifinal matchup between Brownwood and high-flying Springtown. Springtown and Coach Hewlett, formerly of Eastland, they're going to bring that spread offense, that up-tempo game. But you know what? I think the Lions have so much depth defensively. That's why they're giving people problems. Because, I mean, they have got so much depth, so much young talent they can bring in and give people a rest when they need to. That team's loaded. I mean, that team is loaded. They're playing great defensively, and we know they can score.
That's another thing. Like they're another team like Abilene High I mentioned that doesn't have a weakness offense defense. I mean, they're really very well equipped on both sides to compete with really good football teams. I'm with you. I think Brownwood survives and advances. And one of the big reasons is we've seen it this year with Ike Hall. When they are able to just run it down somebody's throat, they'll do it. He'll run for 250 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he is also capable of putting the ball in the air and making plays there as well. He's had games where he's thrown for over 250 yards. Very capable offensively. And you mentioned, I think that the big difference with this team is defensively, they are playing at a super high level right now.
Yes, they are. All right, we both go with the Lions in that one. Region 2 for a D1, Stephenville against Salina. My gosh, this is a tough pick.
Yes,
this is a tough pick. You know, any outcome that comes out of that matchup would not surprise me. But you know what? Stephenville has been playing tough games all year long. They've faced great competition all year long. And they've proven they can win games that are decided by 2 scores or less. They've been very successful at it, and they're playing well defensively. I like the Yellow Jackets in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Yellow Jackets as well. I'm not super confident. I think the Salina team is really good. This is going to be a huge test for the Yellow Jackets. But like you, I mean, Stephenville continues to answer the call. They've won a lot of big ball games this year. And I think with Tristan Gentry, they're going to have the most talented player on the field for either team. And that kid is just a walking touchdown. So with him on leading the offense and then the defensive side playing as well as they are, I like the Stephenville team to advance. And just selfishly, I am crossing my fingers and hoping. I would love a state semifinal between Brownwood and Stephenville. That would be one of the coolest things we've had in
Wouldn't
big
it?
country football in a long time.
Wouldn't it? And it could happen. I mean,
It
it could
could.
happen. Absolutely. All right, now we're going to drop down to Class 3A D1 in Region 1. The Clyde Bulldogs, as we had mentioned before, we think they've got the best team we've seen maybe since the Craig Slaughter era. A great football team. Unfortunately, they've got Brock in the regional semifinals. This is going to be a better football team than they have faced all year by a large margin. This is an awfully good Brock football team that may very well win a state championship. Tons of offense, great defense, tons of depth. I'm going to have to go with the Eagles. It's just going to be a little too much for Clyde this time around, but still a great year for the Bulldogs, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I think this Brock team is just going to be too much. I'm not sure there's a single team in this region, perhaps even this classification that can go toe to toe with Brock. Paradise played them pretty well in the regular season. During district will probably be the best matchup for them in this region, but I got to go with Brock as well. But if you didn't see it, check out the Clyde Shallow Water game story. Danny Dudgeon had a great quote about that matchup. He said this is gonna be a huge test. We're probably 40-point underdogs, but we get to suit up and play a game, so we've got a shot. So that's it's gonna be fun to see if you go give me a good shot. Go out there. You've got a player in Blake Carr, like we said, who is a true difference maker. I'm afraid Brock will be too much for him, but I expect Clyde to give their best effort. They will give them their best shot.
Yeah, absolutely they will. And the thing is this, I mean, if you're going to get to Arlington, if you're going to win in Arlington, if you're going to get there, you have to go through Brock anyway. I mean, the road to Arlington goes through Brock this year. It does. So you're going to have to knock these guys off sooner or later if you want to get there. May as well be now.
Yep.
So we shall see how they hold up against them.
This
All
year,
right, we're gonna drop.
this year and most years it goes through Brock.
Yeah, it does quite often. All right, now we're gonna drop down to Region 1 3A D2, where the Wall Hawks will be facing Lubbock Roosevelt. That's Friday at the Mustang Bowl. I will be on hand for that one. And a lot of people aren't going to agree with me on this one, but this is a dangerous game for Wall. And I'll tell you why. Because both teams play a slow down game and limit possessions. It's the way they play. And when you've got two teams doing that, there's very few possessions in the ball game overall. Very few. The Wall's margin for error really drops. I mean, they got very little margin for error against a team like Roosevelt, who's going to be killing clock left and right every chance they get. So if Wall goes in there and doesn't bring their A game and makes maybe a couple of mistakes and gives up a freebie, this suddenly turns into a dangerous, dangerous game for them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for that reason. This is your type of football game.
Yes.
So
Why do you think I'm going?
I'm not surprised that was the one you chose. But yeah, it's going to be a great defensive game between two teams that have kind of similar mindsets. They're going to go out there and try to be as physical as they can on offense. They're going to be as physical as they can on defense, and they're both comfortable in a low-scoring, slug-it-out game, which I think, like you said, is kind of dangerous for Wall, and that it does make it where a turnover or two could completely change the game. They could flip the momentum in a real hurry. I think Wall is just a little bit better at what it does than Roosevelt is. So I'm taking Wall, but I do think this could be a good, really good, hard fought defensive football game.
I agree with you. I'll go with the Hawks. The Hawks have been showing that they can win those tough football games, that are, maybe one score, two scores. They blew out most of everybody in their district, but this is a team that can win those tight ones as they did last week against Childress. All right, Region 2, 3A D2 semifinal. The Comanche Indians are healthy. And they're going to have to be. They've got Gunter up next, an undefeated Gunter Ball Club. That's going to be at Choctaw Stadium in Arlington. I hate to say it, but Gunter might be capable of overwhelming every single team in 3A D2 in the state, with the possible exception of maybe Canadian. This is going to be a very, very tough matchup for Comanche. They're going to have to get that running game going and kill clock to have a shot. I'm going to have to go with Gunter.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is going to be a really, really tough matchup. This Gunter team is the only team all year that has beaten Brock by more than one score. They handed the Eagles a 35-12 loss early in the season, which tells you the type of football team they have if you're beating that Brock team by 3 touchdowns. But I do think that this Comanche team, like Clyde, is going to go in there and give them all they've got. They're like Clyde. They're playing with house money, and they know it. They're going to go in there. They're going to pull out all the stops. You might see some wacky things in this game where they try to steal some momentum in places where you don't expect them to. Obviously, a huge underdog here. I think everyone expects Gunter to go and win comfortably, but we have seen some pretty major upsets over the years. You talk about when Hamlin made its run to the state championship game several years ago. They beat a Wellington team that everyone thought would just run them off the field. I was at that game for that one, and they lined up and they were able to win that one. And we've seen others with Jim Ned upsetting Brock on the way to their state championship game. So we have seen some pretty major upsets. This would have to be this would rank pretty high up there on the list of upsets we've seen in big country football if they were to pull it off. But I expect Comanche to go out there and to give them the best effort, and I'm excited to see what they do.
All right, and with that, we're going to drop down to Region 1 2A D1, where we have one team remaining in 2A D1. That is the defending state champion, Holly Bearcats. And I'll tell you what, Dan, if you look at their offensive production and how they're playing, especially the Abels kid at quarterback and how well he's playing, and how much more efficient he has become, this team is playing about as well as it did right now, very close to the level they were playing last year at this time in postseason play. It's a dangerous football team. They've got a very good Sonora team at San Angelo ISD Stadium on Friday. That's at 6:00. But I like the Bearcats to win this one by
Yeah, I'm
by maybe 2 or 3 scores. Actually, they're that good.
I'm with you, and I think the Sonora team is very good. They've got running back Edgar DeLuna, who's had a monster season. They can really run the football, but I think this Holly team's just playing at a level where I think they're going to maybe potentially even overwhelm them a little bit. We saw Anson give Sonora all they wanted in the bye district, lost that game by 29-27, and I think we've also seen throughout this playoffs that District 4-3A D1 is kind of handled District 3-3A. So I expect Holly to advance and keep it going. It's going to be fun to see how that turns out.
All right, and with that, we're going to drop down to Region 2 2A D2. And we've got 2 survivors still alive, Dan. We've got undefeated Albany facing Munster Friday at Weatherford's Kangaroo Stadium. And we've got Roscoe facing Collinsville. That's a very good Collinsville team, by the way. That's going to be Friday at Springtown's Porcupine Stadium. That's a beautiful facility up there in Springtown. We'll start with Albany against Munster. Munster has really picked it up. They're playing good football now, but they haven't faced anything the likes of Albany this year. I like the Lions big.
Yeah, I like Albany. I do think this one may be close for a half. This Munster team is better than their record would show. They played a really tough non-district schedule. But yeah, I don't think they're on Albany's level. I think this will be a good test for Albany after a couple of really walkthroughs against El Dorado and Celeste. But yeah, I think Albany advances certainly.
All right, and also we've got Roscoe against Collinsville. This is going to be an interesting style clash, Dan. We've got Roscoe who's going to want to pound the football behind Ivan McCann, and Collinsville who likes to spread the field, throw the football all over the place, and go up tempo. It's going to be the team that can control tempo that's going to win that football game. This is going to be a unique challenge for Roscoe. I know they faced Miles, who likes to throw it around quite a bit, but I think this is going to be a stronger version than Miles. This is a stronger version of Miles, much stronger.
Yeah, and this is a Collinsville team with a quarterback in Logan Jenkins, who has thrown for over 4,400 yards this season. He's also a leading rusher with 400. They don't run the ball a ton, but really, really good throwing the football. He's thrown 60 touchdown passes. A team that can really light it up the scoreboard with that passing game. I think it's going to be a fun matchup. Like you said, kind of a contrast in styles. Roscoe is an interesting team because I think there are probably a lot of people based on maybe their past that kind of view Roscoe as maybe something of a finesse, air it out team. But Roscoe is a very physical team, very physical on both sides of the football. They shut down the run, they run the football. I think this is going to be a really fun contrast and styles matchup between 2 really good football teams. I'm with you. I think Collinsville's probably maybe a little bit more than Roscoe can handle, so I'm going to go with the Pirates in that one. But I think this Roscoe team, I've been impressed with them all year long. I think it's going to be a fun matchup.
I'm going with the Plowboys. I'm going to go ahead and stick with them. They played very, very well against that Windthorst team the other night. They looked great, and Collinsville is going to have to find a way to stop Ivan McCann, and that is not going to be easy. And if he's pounding the rock the way he was the other night, it's tough to stop. So we shall see.
I'm just glad we finally have a difference. We've been agreeing on all of these. It's good to have a disagreement. I think
we'll see. I mean, it's going to be tough. But Roscoe has a lot of athleticism in their defensive secondary. They've got McCann up front, and they've got a couple other kids up front that can put some pressure on the quarterback. They're actually one of these teams that can put pressure on you without blitzing, which makes them really tough. They can drop 7 guys, 8 guys back into coverage sometimes and still put heat on you, which really makes it tough. They got 4 interceptions against Albany in the first half when they played them, and that's part of the reason why. They can pressure you without blitzing. So we'll see. But this is going to be outside of Albany. This is going to be the toughest team that Roscoe has faced this year. So we'll see how they do.
And that's something I'm going to be interested in too, because they had 3 or 4 interceptions against Junction as well. This is a team that does force a ton of turnovers. You mentioned on the line, Parker Gleaton's a kid that is just a handful at that level at 6'4", well over 200 pounds. So the interesting thing here is it's going to be something's got to give. Roscoe forces a bunch of interceptions. Jenkins has only thrown 4 all season, a 60-4 touchdown interception ratio. So
Wow.
that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a really fun challenge and a fun matchup.
All right. With that, we're going to drop down to Class 1A, 6-man, and take a look at what we've got left. We've got a number of teams still playing, vying for trips to Arlington. We've got in Region 2, 1A D1. We've got a big matchup between Westbrook at 11-1 against Borden County, 2 p.m. Saturday at the Mustang Bowl in Sweetwater.
And I think they're just playing really good football. This is a really good Westbrook football team, 11-1, obviously a good Borden County team as well with that same record. I give Westbrook a slight edge. I will go with Westbrook, but it's going to be a tough game as you expect in a region final.
All right, now we're going to go to Region 3, 1A D1 regional final, Gordon and Abbott. And this is an interesting rematch from last year in the regional finals where Abbott eliminated Gordon. Two important things. Gordon last year outperformed all of the computer projections, and they've got everybody back. All their main talent from last year is back. Abbott is the favorite again by a slim margin, but Gordon outperformed all those projections last year. I think they're going to do it again. I like the Longhorns to win this one.
I actually do too. I think this is obviously depending on where you look, you're talking about a 1 to 3 point spread where Abbott's just the slightest of favorites. So I think everybody expects this to be a really good football game. But I like this Gordon team. You're talking about a still young Gordon team that is having success in every sport. These guys have just all grown up together. They're just reaching new highs every single year. I think this Gordon team not only has a chance to win this one, has a chance to get to Arlington if things play out right. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a really tough game because Abbott is very, very good. But I'm going with the upset too. I'm going with the Gordon with the Gordon.
All right, Region 4, 1A D1. The May Tigers are going to be facing Jonesboro, and that's a rematch from a game they played earlier this season with Jonesboro winning. Jonesboro has the edge here. They handled May earlier this year. There's no reason to think that they won't do it again. But you know how May is in postseason. You can't take anything for granted. I expect May to show up and give them all they want, but I'm going to go with Jonesboro to win.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. That first matchup was a 48-22 win by Jonesboro, which by 6-man standards, that's a close game. Anything that's not 45, anything goes distance is a close game.
That's true.
I mean, it's not inconceivable that May could turn things around, but I do think that Jonesboro is the clear favorite here, and I'll go with Jonesboro on this one as well.
All right, with that, we'll go to Region 2, 1A D2. Jayton 12-0 against Benjamin 12-0. This is about as big as it gets for a non-state championship game at the 6-man level. This is a huge game at Hermleys Cardinal Stadium. That's Friday at 6 p.m. I have a difficult time picking against any team that has Grayson Rigdon in the backfield. He is a cut above just about any football team he faces at the 1A level. He could probably start for a lot of 6-man or 6A teams, I should say. He's that good. He's just a tremendous athlete. And in a game like 6-man where you have a lot of open field space, it's just tough to deal with. Can Jayton deal with him? We shall see. The spreads are close. I mean, the spreads are calling this real close. I disagree. I think Benjamin wins this one by multiple scores just because of the nature of the game, and Rigdon in the backfield is going to be hard to stop regardless. Jayton's had a tremendous campaign, and they're to be congratulated.
I'm with you. I'm picking Benjamin to win this game, but I do think it could be closer than you think. I think the spread could actually turn out to be that way. Benjamin outlasted Newcastle for a 112-84 win last week, so it's not unheard of that they could be challenged. And I think this Jayton team is significantly better than Newcastle was. The thing that I think will be interesting.
A good point. I mean, that's a good point.
The thing I think will be interesting about this is if you look at Benjamin's schedule, they have not played very many close games all year. It's basically that Newcastle game, and that's it. If Jayton is able to get them in a 4-quarter game and kind of physical them, which is what Jayton likes to do, It could be interesting, but you are right. When you've got a kid as good as and as athletic as Rigdon is, I mean, he can be a complete game changer in 6-man because with all that space, I mean, he could be running free. Jayton's gonna have to find a way to him in. But if they can do that, I think it'll be an interesting 4-quarter game.
Or find a way to score, 95 or 100 points.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that's the other way to beat them.
And that's not
Just, I mean,
necessarily Jayton's
outscore them.
style.
It might
Yeah,
end up being that type of a football game. They just have to find a way to score a ton of points and stay with them. It's one or the other. It's a tough matchup. All
it
right,
is.
now we're going to go to TAPS 6-man D3. This is a state semifinal. Abilene Christian still alive at 10-2. They're facing Lucas Christian Academy at 10-2. Lucas is just faced maybe a little bit better schedule, has been a little bit better. I think overall, I think this is going to be a great ball game. But I like Lucas to win the football game in a very close matchup. That's going to be Friday in Dublin at 7:00.
Yeah, this one's interesting because I don't think anybody expected Lucas Christian to be here. They beat Fort Worth Covenant Classical last week, 68-48, to advance, and that's a Covenant Classical team that has kind of owned ACS a little bit in district because they share a district together. So I think this is kind of a surprise. I think ACS had fully expected to face Fort Worth Covenant Classical in a rematch here. They're not going to. I don't think Lucas Christian's quite as strong on the whole as what that Covenant Classical team was. So I think this could be a close, tight game. The computers are expecting it to be. I'll probably give Lucas Christian the slight edge because in any team that can beat Covenant Classical's got to be pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
All right, and with that, it's just about time to wrap up the Big Country Preps Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we got 3 separate subscription packages here at Big Country Preps. We got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription for $4 a month, and then we've got an annual 12-month subscription where you knock the price down to $3 a month. That's $36 for a full year of Big Country High School athletic coverage.
We'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, those are available for purchase. We have photo downloads available for $7, as well as some keepsakes and prints. So make sure you check that out. As you scroll through the site, you'll notice pretty quickly we take a lot of photos from these games we are at, and we try to make it to a whole lot of events over the course of the school year. It's something that we really enjoy doing and something we are very proud of here at BigCountryPreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.